Oh, hello. Last time we were together, I mentioned how all I want to do is read The Lord of the Rings. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to read some more of this book. Today we're going to get into chapter 4 of book 3, aka Treebeard, an absolute banger of a chapter. I want to dig into this chapter today because I feel like taking a forest walk with Tolkien, and this is the closest we get in the book to doing that. It also heavily features my boys, the Hobbit PR team, Merry and Pippin, and we are going to be spending some more time with them coming up. So this is my way of foreshadowing that. We're going to read a few passages, talk about what I like about them, and just try to have a nice time for a few minutes. So if you have the 1999 HarperCollins edition, please feel free to read along, crack it open, and spend some time with me. Climb aboard my shoulders. Let's go on a nice little walk through an old-growth forest with our boy J.R.R. Tolkien.
Come on, trees. Come on, shrubs. Come on, flowers. Come on, other kind of flowers. Come on, greenery. Come on, grass. Come on, grass. Come on, nature. Let's get natural.
I told a lie. We're actually going to start in the chapter prior, the Uruk-hai chapter. This is the chapter where Merry and Pippin have been captured by the orcs. They have a few very bad days, and then at this point they have managed to escape. They freed themselves. The riders of Rohan are just absolutely fucking up the orcs, so Merry and Pippin have escaped, and they are walking in a leisurely sort of fashion towards Fangorn Forest. They turned and walked side by side slowly along the line of the river. Behind them, the light grew in the east. As they walked, they compared notes, talking lightly in hobbit fashion of the things that had happened since their capture. No listener would have guessed from their words that they had suffered cruelly and been in dire peril, going without hope towards torment and death, or that even now, as they knew well, they had little chance of ever finding friend or safety again. "You seem to have been doing well, Master Took," said Merry. "You will get almost a chapter in old Bilbo's book, if ever I get a chance to report to him. Good work, especially guessing that hairy villain's little game and playing up to him. But I wonder if anyone will ever pick up your trail and find that brooch. I should hate to lose mine, but I'm afraid yours is gone for good. I shall have to brush up my toes if I'm to get level with you. Indeed, Cousin Brandybuck is going in front now. This is where he comes in. I don't suppose you have much notion where we are, but I spent my time at Rivendell rather better. We are walking west along the Ent-draught. The butt end of the Misty Mountains is in front, and Fangorn Forest." And I wanted to read this passage real quick because I love when Merry and Pippin lean into the bit that they know they're in a story. They know that they're going to be written about if they survive to tell the tale. They know that Bilbo wrote all about his adventures in There and Back Again, and they're expecting that he'll do something similar, or that Frodo will pick up the mantle again if they all make it out alive. So I just love when they break the fourth wall that way, or I guess like the fourth hedge. Like, it's not really a wall because the Red Book is part of the lore of Lord of the Rings, but we are also technically reading the Red Book right now, like we're in it. So I don't know, I find it delightful, and I love whenever it happens. Like, once in a while they'll mention like, oh, this will be a song, this will be a story someday, and I just love that they know that they're eventually probably going to be part of the oral tradition of Middle-earth. And after they continue into the forest, we will continue into the Treebeard chapter proper. Meanwhile, the hobbits went with as much speed as the dark and tangled forest allowed, following the line of the running stream westward and up towards the slopes of the mountains, deeper and deeper into Fangorn. Slowly their fear of the orcs died away, and their pace slackened. A queer stifling feeling came over them, as if the air were too thin or too scanty for breathing. At last, Merry halted. "Oh, we can't go on like this," he panted. "I want some air." "Let's have a drink at any rate," said Pippin. "I'm parched." He clambered onto a great tree root that wound down into the stream, and stooping, drew up some water in his cupped hands. It was clear and cold, and he took many draughts. Merry followed him. The water refreshed them and seemed to cheer their hearts, For a while they sat together on the brink of the stream, dabbling their sore feet and legs, and peering round at the trees that stood silently about them, rank upon rank, until they faded away into grey twilight in every direction. "I suppose you haven't lost us already?" said Pippin, leaning back against a great tree trunk. "We can at least follow the course of this stream, the Ent-draught or whatever you call it, and get out again the way we came." "We could if our legs would do it," said Merry, "and if we could breathe properly." "Yes, it is all very dim and stuffy in here," said Pippin. "It reminds me somehow of the old room in the great place of the Tooks away back in the Smiles at Tuckborough, a huge place where the furniture has never been moved or changed for generations. They say the old Took lived in it year after year while he and the room got older and shabbier together, and it has never been changed since he died a century ago. And old Gerontius was my great-great-grandfather. That puts it back a bit. But that is nothing to the old feeling of this wood. Look at all those weeping, trailing beards and whiskers of lichen, and most of the trees seem to be half covered with ragged, dry leaves that have never fallen. Untidy. I can't imagine what spring would look like here, if it ever comes, still less a spring cleaning." "But the sun at any rate must peep in sometimes," said Merry. "It does not look or feel at all like Bilbo's description of Mirkwood. That was all dark and black and the home of dark black things. This is just dim and frightfully tree-ish. You can't imagine animals living here at all, or staying for long." Pippin's such a nerd. Like any chance to talk about his weird giant family and the weird giant smiles they have at Tuckborough. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the old Took's name correctly. Please call me out in the comments. Gerontius? Gerontius? I don't know. But I do love, look at all those weeping, trailing beards and whiskers of lichen. Pretty much foreshadowing the literal guy named Treebeard that we're about to meet. Merry does mention the sun, and just then they became aware of a yellow light that had appeared some way further on into the wood. Shafts of sunlight seemed suddenly to have pierced the forest roof. "Hello," said Merry. "The sun must have run into a cloud while we've been under these trees, and now she has run out again. Or else she has climbed high enough to look down through some opening. It isn't far. Let's go and investigate." And I just love that the sun is a woman. The sun is she-coded. I cling tightly to the fact that the sun is a woman in Middle-earth. We don't get many women in Lord of the Rings, but the ones we do get are mighty and mysterious and wonderful, and I personally consider the sun one of the named female characters in the Lord of the Rings. She doesn't have any lines, so she doesn't pass the Bechdel test necessarily, but she is there, and she is known, and she is loved, and she is a bringer of hope, a bringer of light, a bringer of brightness and joy. So I appreciate that she's here, because there aren't that many women. You can probably count them on 2 hands, if not 1. So I like that the sun, the light bringer, is indeed one of the few women we get in this text. I'm grasping at straws, I'm very aware, but let me grasp. The light grew broader as they went on, and soon they saw that there was a rock wall before them, the side of a hill or the abrupt end of some long route thrust out by the distant mountains. No trees grew on it, and the sun was falling full on its stony face. The twigs of the trees at its foot were stretched out stiff and still, as if reaching out to the warmth. Where all had looked so shabby and grey before, the wood now gleamed with rich browns, and the smooth black greys of bark like polished leather. The boles of the trees glowed with a soft green like young grass. Early spring, or a fleeting vision of it, was about them. Just as Pippin had said, "I can't imagine what spring looks like here," the sun's like, "Hold up real quick, I got you. Let me show you what it might look like." "Up we go," said Merry joyfully, "now for a breath of air and a sight of the land." And again, I just love that the mere presence of the sun, the mere glimpse of the warmth of the sun, is enough for Merry to speak joyfully, especially after they've escaped captivity at the hands of these fucking Uruk-hai, dude. But they climb and scramble up this rocky hill. There are steps cut into it. They don't know if it was made that way, if someone cut these steps in, or if it was just naturally formed that way. But when they get to the top, above the tree line, they're able to kind of have a look around. "The wind's changing," said Merry. "It's turned east again. It feels cool up here." "Yes," said Pippin. "I'm afraid this is only a passing gleam, and it will all go grey again. What a pity. This shaggy old forest looked so different in the sunlight. I almost felt I liked the place. Almost felt you liked the forest? That's good. That's uncommonly kind of you, said a strange voice. Turn round and let me have a look at your faces. I almost feel that I dislike you both, but do not let us be hasty. Turn around. A large knob-knuckled hand was laid on each of their shoulders, and they were twisted round, gently but irresistibly. Then 2 great arms lifted them up. They found that they were looking at a most extraordinary face. It belonged to a large man-like, almost troll-like figure, at least 14 feet high, very sturdy, with a tall head and hardly any neck. Whether it was clad in stuff like green and gray bark, or whether that was its hide, was difficult to say. At any rate, the arms, at a short distance from the trunk, were not wrinkled, but covered with a smooth brown skin. The large feet had 7 toes each. The lower part of the long face was covered with a sweeping gray beard, bushy, almost twiggy at the roots, and thin and mossy at the ends. But at the moment the hobbits noted little but the eyes. These deep eyes were now surveying them, slow and solemn, but very penetrating. They were brown, shot with a green light. Often afterwards, Pippin tried to describe his first impression of them. One felt as if there was an enormous well behind them, filled up with ages of memory and long, slow, steady thinking, but their surface was sparkling with the present, like sun shimmering on the outer leaves of a vast tree or on the ripples of a very deep lake. I don't know, but it felt as if something that grew in the ground, asleep you might say, or just feeling itself as something between root tip and leaf tip, between deep earth and sky, had suddenly waked up, and was considering you with the same slow care that it had given to its own inside affairs for endless years. I really appreciate that we established Treebeard as being gentle and good-humored immediately. As soon as we meet him, he's kind of like joking around, like, oh, you almost felt you liked my forest? That's uncommonly kind of you. I think it's so sweet. And then he turns them around gently but irresistibly. Like, even though he's, I think, like 3 or 4 times the size of the hobbits, he's very gentle with them. And he's a tree man. He has no reason to be gentle, and yet he is. So clearly this is like a complex creature we're dealing with here. And he has these deep eyes. I love how Pippin is suddenly a poet here with his description of Treebeard's eyes, sparkling with the present, like the sun shimmering on the outer leaves of a vast tree or on the ripples of a very deep lake, something between root tip and leaf tip. And when I say this chapter reminds me of taking a forest walk with Tolkien, this is where I see that, this is where I feel that, is in these kind of observational descriptive passages where you can simply tell the man spent a lot of time in nature. He spent a lot of time among trees, observing how light plays on leaves, and the idea that the sun is shimmering on the ripples of a very deep lake, and that's what Treebeard's eyes are like. So you're seeing the ripples at the surface, but it's only the barest suggestion of what's going on in the deep. Murmured the voice, a deep voice like a very deep woodwind instrument. Very odd indeed. Do not be hasty, that is my motto, but if I had seen you before I heard your voices, I liked them. Nice little voices. They reminded me of something I cannot remember. If I had seen you before I heard you, I should have just trodden on you, taking you for little orcs, and found out my mistake afterwards. Very odd you are indeed. Root and twig, very odd. Pippin, though still amazed, no longer felt afraid. Under those eyes he felt a curious suspense, but not fear. Please, he said, who are you? And what are you? Real quick. Merry and Pippin's voices remind Treebeard of something he cannot remember. And Pippin feels suspense but not fear in the presence of Treebeard. And I think this is kind of pointing to a sense of closeness with nature. Like, the hobbits are very close to Earth, they're very close to their land, and Treebeard has spent time wandering throughout Middle-earth. Like, he's been around a very long time, he has journeyed further afield than Fangorn, and there is something in there where, like, Merry and Pippin, their appearance, their voices, their names are reminiscent of the land that they come from, and Treebeard is reminded of something he cannot remember. So to me, this kind of reads as Treebeard venturing in the land that is now the Shire before the hobbits ever settled there, because the hobbits and their way, like just how they are, is reminiscent of the land that they're from. You know, as culture tends to grow around a location, that happens in Middle-earth as well. But in this case, it's a tree man, an Ent, Treebeard, being reminded and kind of feeling a sense of familiarity with these creatures he's never seen before. Like he's having deja vu about these hobbits, even though he has no idea what they are or where they came from. And Pippin feels a curious suspense but not fear. So like by rights, they should be fucking terrified. Like Treebeard is huge. He's very strange. He appeared out of basically nowhere and picked them up immediately. But he's like, I'm not scared. I'm just frightfully curious. So yeah, I do feel like they're having a meet cute. They're vibing. They're feeling each other. A queer look came into the old eyes, a kind of wariness. The deep wells were covered over. "Whom now?" answered the voice. "Well, I am an Ent, or that's what they call me. Yes, Ent is the word. The Ent I am, you might say, in your manner of speaking. Fangorn is my name according to some. Treebeard others make it. Treebeard will do." "An Ent?" said Mary. "What's that? But what do you call yourself? What's your real name?" "Who now?" replied Treebeard. "Who? Now that would be telling. Not so hasty. And I am doing the asking. You are in my country. What are you, I wonder? I cannot place you. You do not seem to come in the old lists that I learned when I was young. But that was a long, long time ago, and they may have made new lists. Let me see. How did it go? Learn now the lore of the living creatures. First name the four, the free peoples. Eldest of all the elf children, dwarf the delver, dark are his houses, Ent the earthborn, old as mountains, man the mortal, master of horses, Beaver the builder, buck the leaper, bear bee hunter, boar the fighter, hound is hungry, hare is fearful, Eagle and eyrie, ox in pasture, hart horn crowned, hawk is swiftest, swan the whitest, serpent coldest, How did it go? Room-tum, room-ti-toom-tum. It was a long list. But anyway, you do not seem to fit in anywhere. Treebeard apparently knows a list of every living thing in Middle-earth, and it includes, from this excerpt anyway, 2 different types of deer and 3 different types of bird. Like, how long are we gonna be here? How long is this list? But hobbits aren't on there, because no one knows what the fuck hobbits are. Only hobbits know what hobbits are. No one else apparently has ever heard of them. This is a running theme throughout Lord of the Rings, and I find it hilarious every time it comes up. No one knows what hobbits are. Indeed, we always seem to have got left out of the old lists and the old stories, said Mary. Yet we've been about for quite a long time. We're hobbits. Why not make a new line, said Pippin. Half-grown hobbits, the hole dwellers. Put us in amongst the 4 next to man, or the big people, and you've got it. Hobbit PR team, in action. They're back, and they're better than ever.
This is what we do, this is who we are. We're Dobers PR, we're Dobers PR.
We always seem to have got left out of the old lists, says Mary. Like, yes, this is a common administrative error. Let us correct it for you. And Pippin just suggests a new line right off the dome. He's like, yeah, I was paying attention to the structure of that list you were relaying to us. Call us half-grown hobbits, the hole dwellers, and put us in with the free peoples, and you've got it.
We love what we do, and we love who we are. We're Dobers PR, we're Dobers PR.
Treebeard continues. Not bad, said Treebeard. That would do. So you live in holes, eh? That sounds very right and proper. Who calls you hobbits, though? That does not sound elvish to me. Elves made all the old words. They began it. Nobody else calls us hobbits. We call ourselves that, said Pippin. Come now, not so hasty. You call yourselves hobbits, but you should not go telling just anybody. You'll be letting out your own right names if you're not careful. We aren't careful about that, said Mary. As a matter of fact, I'm a Brandybuck, Mary Adog Brandybuck, though most people just call me Mary. And I'm a Took, Peregrine Took, but I'm generally called Pippin, or even Pip. But you are hasty folk, I see, said Treebeard. I am honored by your confidence, but you should not be too free all at once. There are Ents and Ents, you know, or there are Ents and things that look like Ents but ain't, as you might say. I'll call you Mary and Pippin, if you please. Nice names. Again, the hobbits are like, you seem to not get it, bud. Like, we self-identify as hobbits. No one else calls us that. We call ourselves that. Thank you very much. And we are not careful about letting you know our names. You told us your name, so let's give you our full names, our family names, and our nicknames, just real quick, just so we can be on familiar footing with one another. I just love that as soon as these folks meet each other, as soon as the hobbits and Treebeard meet each other, they're like, all right, how do we establish, like, where do you fit into the old lists? What are you? Who are you? What's your name? The significance of clear communication cannot be overstated in Tolkien. Like, I just love that they spend so much time being like,
wait a minute! Who are you?
I find it delightful. And Treebeard is trying to caution them against being too hasty, saying there are Ents and Ents, you know, like, you can't trust all Ents. You can trust me.
I'm not like a regular mom. I'm a cool mom.
But you can't trust all Ents, so y'all better be careful. And I like that he thinks they have nice names. I just think it's sweet. He continues, for I am not going to tell you my name, not yet at any rate. A queer, half-knowing, half-humorous look came with a green flicker into his eyes. For one thing, it would take a long while. My name is growing all the time, and I've lived a very long, long time. So my name is like a story. Real names tell you the story of the things they belong to in my language, in the Old Entish, as you might say. It is a lovely language, but it takes a very long time to say anything in it, because we do not say anything in it unless it is worth taking a long time to say and to listen to. And I love that queer, half-knowing, half-humorous look that comes with a green flicker into Treebeard's eyes. He's playing with the hobbits, like, he's playing in the space with them. He's kind of like being a little bit cheeky. It's adorable. He's picking up what they're putting down. It's really nice. Like, they're relating to one another immediately. Oof. But now, and the eyes became very bright and present, seeming to grow smaller and almost sharp. What is going on? What are you doing in it all? I can see and hear and smell and feel a great deal from this, ah la 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 rumba camanda lindo brume. Excuse me, that is a part of my name for it. I do not know what the word is in the outside languages, you know, the thing we are on, where I stand and look out on fine mornings and think about the sun and the grass beyond the wood and the horses and the clouds and the unfolding of the world. What is going on? What is Gandalf up to? And these burarum, he made a deep rumbling noise like a discord on a great organ. These orcs and young Saruman down at Isengard. I like news, but not too quick now. There is quite a lot going on, said Mary, and even if we tried to be quick, it would take a long time to tell. But you told us not to be hasty. Ought we to tell you anything so soon? Would you think it rude if we asked what you are going to do with us, and which side you are on? And did you know Gandalf? Yes, I do know him. The only wizard that really cares about trees, said Treebeard. Do you know him? Yes, said Pippin sadly. We did. He was a great friend, and he was our guide. Then I can answer your other questions, said Treebeard. I am not going to do anything with you, not if you mean by that do something to you without your leave. We might do some things together. I don't know about sides. I go my own way, but your way may go along with mine for a while. But you speak of Master Gandalf as if he was in a story that had come to an end. Yes, we do, said Pippin sadly. The story seems to be going on, but I'm afraid Gandalf has fallen out of it. "Whoo, come now," said Treebeard. Ah, well." He paused, looking long at the hobbits. Ah, well, I do not know what to say. Come now." "If you would like to hear more," said Mary, "we will tell you, but it will take some time. Wouldn't you like to put us down? Couldn't we sit here together in the sun while it lasts? You must be getting tired of holding us up." Tired? No, I am not tired. I do not easily get tired. And I do not sit down. I am not very, bendable. But there the sun is going in. Let us leave this... Did you say what you call it? "Hill?" suggested Pippin. "Shelf? Step?" suggested Mary. Treebeard repeated the words thoughtfully. "Hill. Yes, that was it. But it is a hasty word for a thing that has stood here ever since this part of the world was shaped. Never mind, let us leave it and go." "Where shall we go?" asked Mary. "To my home, or one of my homes," answered Treebeard. "Is it far?" "I do not know. You might call it far, perhaps, but what does that matter?" "Well, you see, we've lost all our belongings," said Mary. "We have only a little food." "Oh, you need not trouble about that," said Treebeard. "I can give you a drink that will keep you green and growing for a long, long while. And if we decide to part company, I can set you down outside my country at any point you choose. Let us go." So that's a long passage. There's a couple things I really want to chat about. Firstly, Treebeard doesn't know the word hill. To him, the shelf thing that they're on, the rocky outcropping, is a la 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 rumba camanda lindo brume. It's the thing where he stands and looks out on fine mornings and thinks about the sun and the grass beyond the wood and the horses and the clouds and the unfolding of the world. Real names tell the story of the thing that they are. That's what Old Entish is, and that's what this hill is to Treebeard. It's not just a hill, it's not just a shelf or a step. It's the place where he stands and looks out on fine mornings and thinks about the grass and the wood and the horses and the unfolding of the world. His worldview is evident here. Rather than a hasty word like hill, like a man or a hobbit would see it and be like, "Oh, that's a hill." Treebeard knows the story of the thing. He knows his experience of the thing, and that is his name for it. Excuse me, that is a part of my name for it. It has an even longer name than that. It tells even more of a story than that. That's so wonderful. Tolkien's conception of this ancient tree being's worldview and the way that he sees the world around him and the way that he wants to know the story of things and has a part in the story of things is truly wonderful to me. Hey, what up? It's me. I'm editing right now and realizing that I forgot to say a bunch of stuff that I meant to say because I recorded this video when I was getting over a cold. My head was not 100% in the right place, and yet I persisted. So editing Mackenzie here to add some stuff back in because this video isn't already long enough. This little bit where Treebeard's talking about his word for hill, there's a relevant footnote in the appendices that I just want to point out really quick. So in Appendix F of Return of the King, the languages and peoples of the Third Age, Tolkien discusses the languages of the Ents, talking about how they were skilled in tongues, they learned them swiftly and never forgot them, they preferred the languages of the Eldar or the Elves, they loved best the ancient High Elven tongue. The strange words and names that the hobbits record as used by Treebeard and other Ents are thus Elvish, or fragments of elf speech strung together in Ent fashion. And he footnotes that by saying, except where the hobbits seem to have made some attempts to represent shorter murmurs and calls made by the Ents. Ah la 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 rumba camanda lindor burume also is not Elvish, and is the only extant, and probably very inaccurate, attempt to represent a fragment of actual Entish. And I wanted to point this out just because I never get enough of Tolkien being such a nerd about languages. I love that he's covered every layer of his world building just with language alone. Yeah, I like that he's kind of poking fun at the hobbits a little bit. He's like, they're listening to sounds and writing down the sounds, but in no way should you assume that that's what Old Entish would actually be transcribed as. That's just Merry and Pippin hearing some stuff and trying to write it down as they heard it. They're doing phonetics. It just points to one of the many, many reasons I'm obsessed with J.R.R. Tolkien, and with Lord of the Rings in particular, is the fun he is clearly having with the languages he invented, and then his characters trying to make sense of the languages they're hearing and doing a bad job. Like, he has his tongue in his cheek. He's writing an inside joke with himself, basically, and I'm so here for it. Like, the sense of fun in this text is always at the surface for me. Like, that's always the first thing that I see and feel and cling to, is how much fun Tolkien's having while he's writing it. And this little, like, in-joke, in-world read of Merry and Pippin, and, like, their probably very inaccurate attempt to represent a fragment of actual Entish, it feeds me. It's these little tiny details that really make this text for me. So just want to point that out. And now back to me. I love that Merry kind of throws some sass back at Treebeard. You told us not to be hasty. And continues being the Hobbit PR team by saying, aren't you getting tired of holding us up? Don't you want to put us down, sit in the sun for a little bit? Like, either he is terribly uncomfortable being held by Treebeard, and or he's trying to kind of like retake control of the situation a little bit. He's like, we're not going to tell you everything just yet. Maybe you should put us down, huh? And Treebeard counters with, I don't get tired, so you can stop right there. I also really love, we might do some things together. Your way may go along with mine for a while. Treebeard's really into semantics. It's not, what are you gonna do with us? It's, we're gonna do some stuff together. He has no malintent. He has no sense of wanting to capture the hobbits, use them for anything. He's just curious about them and wants to hang out for a little bit. What's better than that? Just
Guys being dudes.
And then again, Treebeard's worldview comes through when Merry asks if it's far to get to Treebeard's home or one of his homes. You might call it far, perhaps, but what does that matter? Like, the Hobbit's conception of distance has no bearing on Treebeard's understanding of distance. They don't even count in, like, miles or fathoms or furlongs or whatever. They count in Ent-strides. So the entire paradigm has shifted. The hobbits are completely out of their element here. They have no frame of reference. And that's fine. Treebeard's here to guide them along. So he picks them up gently, one in each like crook of his arms, and walks them many thousands of Ent-strides to his house. As they go, they talk about Lothlorien and Celeborn. They talk about how trees and Ents are like one another. Ents are tree herds, so they're shepherds of the forest. They shepherd trees. Shepherds become like sheep, sheep like shepherds. And Treebeard remarks that I do not understand all that goes on myself, so I cannot explain it to you. Some of us are still true Ents and lively enough in our fashion, but many are growing sleepy, going tree-ish, as you might say. Most of the trees are just trees, of course, but many are half awake. Some are quite wide awake, and a few are, well, getting Entish. That is going on all the time. So he's kind of commenting on how some trees wake up and become more like Ents. Some Ents go to sleep and become more like trees. And it's going on all the time. There's this kind of push and pull, this constant shifting of consciousness happening in his forest. So finally, they get to Treebeard's Ent house. It's kind of like, I picture it sort of as like a hall of trees with a stone arch at the back, and there's a little stream that falls over the arch into a stone basin and then rejoins the Entwash. Here we are, said Treebeard, breaking his long silence. I have brought you about 70,000 Ent-strides, but what that comes to in the measurement of your land, I do not know. Anyhow, we are near the roots of the last mountain. Part of the name of this place might be Wellinghall if it were turned into your language. I like it. We shall stay here tonight. He set them down on the grass between the aisles of the trees, and they followed him towards the great arch. The hobbits now noticed that as he walked, his knees hardly bent, but his legs opened in a great stride. He planted his big toes, and they were indeed big and very broad, on the ground first, before any other part of his feet. For a moment, Treebeard stood under the rain of the falling spring and took a deep breath. Then he laughed and passed inside. A great stone table stood there, but no chairs. At the back of the bay it was already quite dark. Treebeard lifted 2 great vessels and stood them on the table. They seemed to be filled with water, but he held his hands over them, and immediately they began to glow, one with a golden and the other with a rich green light. And the blending of the 2 lights lit the bay, as if the sun of summer was shining through a roof of young leaves. Looking back, the hobbits saw that the trees in the court had also begun to glow, faintly at first, but steadily quickening, until every leaf was edged with light, some green, some gold, some red as copper, while the tree trunks looked like pillars molded out of luminous stone. So you know when you're on a walk in the golden hour of the evening, and the light is coming through the trees and dappling? We're getting that dappling effect. That's what Treebeard's created here. Well, well, now we can talk again, said Treebeard. You are thirsty, I expect. Perhaps you are also tired. Drink this. He went to the back of the bay, and then they saw that several tall stone jars stood there with heavy lids. He removed one of the lids and dipped in a great ladle, and with it filled 3 bowls, 1 very large bowl and 2 smaller ones. This is an Ent house, he said, and there are no seats, I fear, but you may sit on the table. Picking up the hobbits, he set them on the great stone slab 6 feet above the ground, and there they sat dangling their legs and drinking in sips. Hobbits are canonically leg danglers. They do this a lot, it happens all the time, it's adorable every time. Just wanted to point that out, it's very cute. The drink was like water, indeed very like the taste of the draughts they had drunk from the Entmoot near the borders of the forest, and yet there was some scent or savor in it which they could not describe. It was faint, but it reminded them of the smell of a distant wood borne from afar by a cool breeze at night. The effect of the draught began at the toes and rose steadily through every limb, bringing refreshment and vigor as it coursed upwards, right to the tips of the hair. Indeed, the hobbits felt that the hair on their heads was actually standing up, waving and curling and growing. As for Treebeard, he first laved his feet in the basin beyond the arch, and then he drained his bowl at 1 draught. 1 long, slow draught. The hobbits thought he would never stop. Hey, I'm back with more shit I forgot. I really just wanted to highlight the description of the effect of the Ent-draughts on the hobbits. It began at the toes and rose steadily through every limb, bringing refreshment and vigor as it coursed upwards right to the tips of the hair. Indeed, the hobbits felt that the hair on their heads was actually standing up, waving and curling and growing. I've just always found that so evocative and so effective as a description of the green and growing nature of the Ent-draughts. Like, that's, you know, I included the clip from Planet Earth of the time-lapse of foliage and ferns kind of growing up and unfolding and curling and waving as they seek the sunlight, because it is the most direct mental image, or the most direct video, I suppose, of the mental image and the feeling I get when I read that passage. Yeah, there's something about that description that I've always, like, it makes me sit up a little bit straighter. It makes me feel like my hair is waving, curling, and growing. I think it's so nice. So yeah, I really wanted to shed a brighter light on that passage in particular. And now, once again, back to me. Now, tell me your tale, and do not hurry, said Treebeard. The hobbits began to tell him the story of their adventures ever since they left Hobbiton. They followed no very clear order, for they interrupted one another continually, and Treebeard often stopped the speaker and went back to some earlier point, or jumped forward asking questions about later events. They said nothing whatever about the ring, and did not tell him why they set out or where they were going to, and he did not ask for any reasons. He was immensely interested in everything, in the Black Riders, in Elrond and Rivendell, in the Old Forest, in Tom Bombadil, in the mines of Moria, and in Lothlorien and Galadriel. He made them describe the Shire and its country over and over again. Treebeard was, however, especially interested in everything that concerned Gandalf, and most interested of all in Saruman's doings. The hobbits regretted very much that they knew so little about them, only a rather vague report by Sam of what Gandalf had told the council. But they were clear, at any rate, that Augustus Gloop? I don't know how to say his name either, I'm so sorry. I don't know shit about fuck. But they were clear, at any rate, that Ugluk and his troop came from Isengard, and spoke of Saruman as their master. Said Treebeard, when at last their story had wound and wandered down to the battle of the orcs and the riders of Rohan. Well, well, that is a bundle of news and no mistake. You have not told me all, no indeed, not by a long way. But I do not doubt that you are doing as Gandalf would wish. There is something very big going on, that I can see, and what it is maybe I shall learn in good time, or in bad time. By root and twig, but it is a strange business. Up sprout a little folk that are not in the old lists, and behold, the 9 forgotten riders reappear to hunt them, and Gandalf takes them on a great journey, and Galadriel harbors them in Caras Galadon, and orcs pursue them down all the leagues of Wilderland. Indeed, they seem to be caught up in a great storm. I hope they weather it. And what about yourself? Asked Merry. I have not troubled about the great wars, said Treebeard. They mostly concern elves and men. That is the business of wizards. Wizards are always troubled about the future. I do not like worrying about the future. I am not altogether on anybody's side, because nobody is altogether on my side, if you understand me. Nobody cares for the woods as I care for them, not even elves nowadays. Still, I take more kindly to elves than to others. It was the elves that cured us of dumbness long ago, and that was a great gift that cannot be forgotten, though our ways have parted since. And there are some things, of course, whose side I am altogether not on. I am against them altogether, these Burarum. He again made a deep rumble of disgust. These orcs and their masters. I used to be anxious when the shadow lay on Mirkwood, but when it removed to Mordor I did not trouble for a while. Mordor is a long way away. But it seems that the wind is setting east, and the withering of all woods may be drawing near. There is naught that an old Ent can do to hold back that storm. He must weather it or crack. But Saruman now. Saruman is a neighbor. I cannot overlook him. I must do something, I suppose. I have often wondered lately what I should do about Saruman. Hello, Editing Mackenzie again. Just wanted to kind of re-highlight where the hobbits are describing their kind of journey thus far to Treebeard, and he's making them stop and saying, wait, let's go back to this. Let me hear more about this. Just give me the drama. Like, I just want to hear what I'm interested in. Like, the rest of it, fine, whatever. But, like, wizards, check. Tom Bombadil, check. The Old Forest, check. The Shire, check. That's what I want to hear about. Let's jump back and forth. Like, just the disorganized nature of their conversation with Treebeard while they're trying to tell their story so far cracks me up. It just makes me laugh. And I do like that he's interested in Tom Bombadil. Like, he's immensely interested in the Black Riders, Elrond, Rivendell, the Old Forest, the Mines Moria, Lothlorien, Galadriel, and Tom Bombadil. And I like that because in the initial draft of this chapter of Treebeard, as Christopher Tolkien points out in The History of Middle-earth, there was a longer passage about Tom Bombadil where the hobbits are asking about him and all of this, and Treebeard knows of him. And then in the final draft, which changed very little from the initial draft, but bits like that stuff about Tom Bombadil did get cut out, there's a little hint of it here. So, like, you can tell Tolkien is like, remember that guy Tom Bombadil? You haven't forgotten about him, and neither have I. Like, here's another mention of him. It just cracks me up, and again kind of points to Tolkien clinging to certain bits of the story that stuck with him initially, and one of those is Tom Bombadil. Whether you like Tom Bombadil or not, he's in the book, and he's clearly very important to Tolkien because he keeps coming up. And I'm going to have to make a whole other video about Tom Bombadil at some point when I'm brave enough to do so, because I know he's probably one of the more, if not the most polarizing character in the canon. So, yeah, I just wanted to point that out. And I will show the passage from History of Middle-earth that talks about Tom Bombadil here. If you want to pause and read it, please feel free. I think it's great. And once again, back to me. So Treebeard is kind of letting on that he knows that the hobbits aren't telling the whole story. But he doesn't mind. He's not on anyone's side because no one's altogether on his side. And he doesn't really trouble with the wars of elves and men. That's the wizard's job to kind of look after all of that. He knows for sure that he doesn't like orcs, and he knows for sure that Saruman's up to something, so he continues chatting with the hobbits about it. Treebeard rumbled for a moment, as if he were pronouncing some deep subterranean Entish malediction. Some time ago I began to wonder how orcs dared to pass through my woods so freely, he went on. Only lately did I guess that Saruman was to blame, and that long ago he had been spying out all the ways and discovering my secrets. He and his foul folk are making havoc now. Down on the borders they are felling trees. Good trees. Some of the trees they just cut down and leave to rot. Orc mischief, that. But most are hewn up and carried off to feed the fires of Orthanc. There is always a smoke rising from Isengard these days. Curse him, root and branch! Many of those trees were my friends, creatures I had known from nut and acorn. Many had voices of their own that are lost forever now. And there are wastes of stump and bramble where once there were singing groves. I have been idle. I have let things slip. It must stop. Treebeard raised himself from his bed with a jerk, stood up, and thumped his hand on the table. The vessels of light trembled and sent up 2 jets of flame. There was a flicker like green fire in his eyes, and his beard stood out stiff as a great besom. Besom? Besom? I'm gonna get yelled at. I'm in trouble.
Besom.
Fuck! I will stop it, he boomed, and you shall come with me. You may be able to help me. You will be helping your own friends that way too, for if Saruman is not checked, Rohan and Gondor will have an enemy behind as well as in front. Our roads go together, to Isengard. We will come with you, said Merry. We will do what we can. Yes, said Pippin. I should like to see the White Hand overthrown. I should like to be there, even if I could not be of much use. I shall never forget Ugluk and the crossing of Rohan. Good, good, said Treebeard. But I spoke hastily. We must not be hasty. I have become too hot. I must cool myself and think, for it is easier to shout stop than to do it. This is literally Treebeard deciding that he needs to do something, that he needs to take action. He's kind of been observing what Saruman's been up to. He's known that there have been orcs wandering in his woods very freely and walking in sunlight. And he's been suspicious of Saruman and his actions for a long while now. He knows that Saruman and the orcs have been felling trees, either to feed the fires of Orthanc or for literally no reason other than to leave a barren land behind and take away the power of the forest. Treebeard's getting pissed. Like, he's waking up a little bit. He's roused. And it's his idea to march on Isengard. The hobbits are like, yeah, dude, we'll totally come with you. That sounds fucking sick. But it's Treebeard's idea.
Oh, that doesn't make sense to me.
They continue chatting. They talk about the other Ents of Fangorn, and they talk about Entwives. I'm not going to dig too deep into this. It's mostly a story of grief, and this feeds into a kind of overall theme of disenchantment. Eventually, Treebeard wishes them good night. But first, he says, "But now I am going to stand up and take a little sleep. Where will you stand?" "We usually lie down to sleep," said Merry. "We shall be all right where we are." "Lie down to sleep?" said Treebeard. "Why, of course you do. I was forgetting. Singing that song put me in mind of old times. Almost thought that I was talking to young Entings, I did. Well, you can lie on the bed. I am going to stand in the rain. Good night." Merry and Pippin remind Treebeard of young Entings. I'm not crying, I promise. Merry and Pippin climbed onto the bed and curled up in the soft grass and fern. It was fresh and sweet-scented and warm. The lights died down, and the glow of the trees faded, but outside under the arch they could see old Treebeard, standing motionless, with his arms raised above his head. The bright stars peered out of the sky and lit the falling water as it spilled onto his fingers and head, and dripped in hundreds of silver drops onto his feet. Listening to the tinkling of the drops, the hobbits fell asleep. So I don't know, I just love that Treebeard, even though he is an Ent and he's not tree-ish, he sleeps like a tree with his arms above his head, letting the water drip down onto him. And I just love that description of the bright stars peering out of the sky, lighting the falling water as it spills onto his fingers and head in hundreds of silver drops. If you've been in a forest when it's raining, you know exactly what we're talking about here. And again, I think we're just kind of on a nice walk through an old growth forest with Tolkien in this chapter. There are so many little indications of it in the descriptions and just the imagery that we're given throughout. I love it. So the next day, they awake. Treebeard's like, we gotta go to Entmoot. And Pippin's like, where's Entmoot? And Treebeard's like, Entmoot is the meeting. Durndingle is the place where we have the meeting. Dingus, like, how dare you not know that? So Treebeard gets Merry and Pippin in the crooks of his arms again, like he did the day prior, and walks with them to Durndingle, to the location of Entmoot. When they get there, several Ents had already arrived. More were coming in down the other paths, and some were now following Treebeard. As they drew near, the hobbits gazed at them. They had expected to see a number of creatures as much like Treebeard as one hobbit is like another, at any rate to a stranger's eye. And they were very much surprised to see nothing of the kind. At first, Merry and Pippin were struck chiefly by the variety that they saw. The many shapes and colors, the differences in girth and height and length of leg and arm, and in the number of toes and fingers, anything from 3 to 9. A few seemed more or less related to Treebeard and reminded them of beech trees or oaks, but there were other kinds. Some recalled the chestnut, brown-skinned Ents with large splay-fingered hands and short, thick legs. Some recalled the ash, tall, straight, grey Ents with many-fingered hands and long legs. Some the fir, the tallest Ents, and others the birch, the rowan, and the linden. But when the Ents all gathered round Treebeard, bowing their heads slightly, murmuring in their slow musical voices, and looking long and intently at the strangers, then the hobbits saw that they were all of the same kindred, and they all had the same eyes. Not all so old or so deep as Treebeard's, but all with the same slow, steady, thoughtful expression, and the same green flicker. As soon as the whole company was assembled, standing in a wide circle round Treebeard, a curious and unintelligible conversation began. The Ents began to murmur slowly. First one joined and then another, until they were all chanting together in a long, rising and falling rhythm, now louder on one side of the ring, now dying away there and rising to a great boom on the other side. Though he could not catch or understand any of the words, he supposed the language was Entish, Pippin found the sound very pleasant to listen to at first, but gradually his attention wavered. After a long time, and the chant showed no signs of slackening, he found himself wondering, since Entish was such an unhasty language, whether they had yet got further than good morning. And if Treebeard was to call the roll, how many days it would take to sing all their names. I wonder what the Entish is for yes or no, he thought. He yawned. Treebeard was immediately aware of him. Hey, my Pippin, he said, and the other Ents all stopped their chant. You are a hasty folk, I was forgetting, and anyway it is wearisome listening to a speech you do not understand. You may get down now. I have told your names to the Entmoot, and they have seen you, and they have agreed that you are not orcs, and that a new line shall be put in the old lists. We have got no further yet, but that is quick work for an Entmoot. You and Mary can stroll about in the dingle if you like. There is a well of good water if you need refreshing, away yonder in the north bank. There are still some words to speak before the moot really begins. I will come and see you again and tell you how things are going. Oh, it's so nice. Like, Merry and Pippin are kind of watching the Entmoot begin. They're watching the trees commune and converse with one another. Or the Ents, not trees. I need to be more careful in my speaking, like Treebeard. I need not be so hasty. Pippin's kind of thinking about, like, I wonder what yes and no are in Old Entish and how long it would take to say those things. And he yawns, and Treebeard immediately is like, oh shit, I forgot about my hasty little guys. Y'all go take a walk if you want, do whatever you like. We've got some more business to attend to, but I'll come and check in with y'all in a little bit. So Merry and Pippin go for a walk in the dingle and have a little chat. What's Isengard like? Said Pippin. I wonder what Ents can do about it anyway. So do I, said Merry. Isengard is a sort of ring of rocks or hills, I think, with a flat space inside and an island or pillar of rock in the middle called Orthanc. Saruman has a tower on it. There is a gate, perhaps more than one, in the encircling wall, and I believe there is a stream running through it, It comes out of the mountains and flows on across the Gap of Rohan. It does not seem the sort of place for Ents to tackle. But I have an odd feeling about these Ents. Somehow I don't think they are quite as safe and, well, funny as they seem. They seem slow, queer, and patient, almost sad, and yet I believe they could be roused. If that happened, I would rather not be on the other side. Yes, said Pippin, I know what you mean. There might be all the difference between an old cow sitting and thoughtfully chewing and a bull charging, and the change might come suddenly. I wonder if Treebeard will rouse them. I am sure he means to try. But they don't like being roused. Treebeard got roused himself last night and then bottled it up again. The hobbits turned back. The voices of the Ents were still rising and falling in their conclave. The sun had now risen high enough to look over the high hedge. It gleamed on the tops of the birches and lit the northward side of the dingle with a cool yellow light. There they saw a little glittering fountain. They walked along the rim of the great bowl at the feet of the evergreens. It was pleasant to feel cool grass about their toes again and not to be in a hurry. And then they climbed down to the gushing water. They drank a little, a clean, cold, sharp draught, and sat down on a mossy stone, watching the patches of sun on the grass and the shadows of the sailing clouds passing over the floor of the dingle. The murmur of the Ents went on. It seemed a very strange and remote place, outside their world and far from everything that had ever happened to them. A great longing came over them for the faces and voices of their companions, especially for Frodo and Sam, and for Strider. Just a couple little bits here. Pippin asking Merry what Isengard's like, as if Merry has any fucking idea. But Merry does know a bit. He did do some reading in Rivendell, and he suspects that there's more to the Ents than meets the eye, which I think is important. They're not quite as safe and funny as they seem, because again, Merry and Pippin feel very safe with Treebeard, but there's something bubbling under the surface. Like, they could be roused, and I'd rather not be on the other side of them if that happens. And Pippin knows, like, they don't like being roused. Like, Treebeard got all worked up and then tried to, like, bottle it up. And everything is very unfamiliar and strange. They're not scared, they're curious, but they are feeling a sense of unbelonging. They're longing for familiarity, and they're not necessarily finding it in this forest. Editing Mackenzie here. I just wanted to highlight a bit of this passage. It just is so pleasant. They saw a little glittering fountain, they walked along the rim of the great bowl. It was pleasant to feel cool grass about their toes again and not to be in a hurry. They watched the patches of sun on the grass and the shadows of the sailing clouds passing over the floor of the dingle, and the murmur of the Ents goes on in the background. So they can see the sun, they can drink water, they can have their feet in the grass, and it feels cool and pleasant and unhurried, and yet it seems a very strange and remote place outside their world and far from everything that had ever happened to them. So to me, this kind of says, obviously there's an otherworldliness about Fangorn, we know that, but it's almost like a fantasy world within a fantasy world, where even though it's a forest and it's not anything the hobbits are unfamiliar with, that being a forest, this one feels different because of the Ents and because of how they are and because they've watched the sun pass over the grass a million times, but here it just feels different. And I think that's just a very effective description of the feeling that Fangorn gives them. Like, it's different from Lothlorien. It's different from the other weird forests they've already been through on their journey. And it's lonely. They just feel very apart. Treebeard has made them feel very welcome, and yet they know that this is not, it doesn't feel like their world. I find it a very effective description of how Fangorn is like and yet unlike any other forest the hobbits have been in before. There's a sense of familiarity with Treebeard, a sense of curiosity but not fear, and yet this sense of like strange remoteness of being detached from their world. Not quite transcendent, but it's very far away from everything else. It seems sequestered, I suppose is the word I'm looking for. So yeah, I just wanted to lean on that a little bit. Back to me, once again. At last there came a pause in the Ent voices, and looking up they saw Treebeard coming towards them with another Ent at his side. Here I am again, said Treebeard. Are you getting weary or feeling impatient, Well, I am afraid that you must not get impatient yet. We have finished the first stage now, but I have still got to explain things again to those that live a long way off, far from Isengard, and those that I could not get round to before the moot, and after that we shall have to decide what to do. However, deciding what to do does not take Ents so long as going over all the facts and events that they have to make up their minds about. Still, it is no use denying we shall be here a long time yet. A couple of days very likely. So I have brought you a companion. He has an Ent house nearby. Bray Galad is his elvish name. He says he has already made up his mind and does not need to remain at the moot. He is the nearest thing among us to a hasty Ent. You ought to get on together. Goodbye! Treebeard turned and left them. Bray Galad stood for some time, surveying the hobbits solemnly, and they looked at him, wondering when he would show any signs of hastiness. He was tall and seemed to be one of the younger Ents. He had smooth, shining skin on his arms and legs, his lips were ruddy and his hair was gray-green. He could bend and sway like a slender tree in the wind. At last he spoke, and his voice, though resonant, was higher and clearer than Treebeard's. My friends, let us go for a walk, he said. I am Bray Galad, that is Quickbeam in your language, but it is only a nickname, of course. They have called me that ever since I said yes to an elder Ent before he had finished his question. Also, I drink quickly, and go out while some are still wetting their beards. Come with me. He reached down 2 shapely arms and gave a long-fingered hand to each of the hobbits. I want to hold hands with an Ent and walk around. Come on. All that day they walked about in the woods with him, singing and laughing, for Quickbeam often laughed. He laughed if the sun came up from behind a cloud, he laughed if they came upon a stream or spring, then he stooped and splashed his feet and head with water. He laughed sometimes at some sound or whisper in the trees. Whenever he saw a rowan tree, he halted a while with his arms stretched out and sang and swayed as he sang. Quickbeam is so cool. I love this hasty Ent. He's so dope. He's quick to laugh. He rejoices in the simple appearance of a stream so he can splash his feet. And whenever he sees rowan trees, he's exultant. He halts and kind of sings and sways. He's, just a great example of another Ent. There are all different sorts of trees. There are all different sorts of Ents. Some are hastier than others. And Quickbeam is a particularly joyful Ent, even though he has experienced great grief. Many of his rowan trees have been cut down by Saruman and the orcs, but despite that, he still manages to take joy and pleasure and laughter in the forest, and I think that's important to remember. So the hobbits hang out with Quickbeam for that day and the whole next day, and then the third day broke, bleak and windy. At sunrise, the Ents' voices rose to a great clamor and then died down again. As the morning wore on, the wind fell and the air grew heavy with expectancy. The hobbits could see that Bray Galad was now listening intently, although to them, down in the dell of his Ent house, the sound of the moot was faint. The afternoon came, and the sun, going west towards the mountains, sent out long yellow beams between the cracks and fissures of the clouds. Suddenly they were aware that everything was very quiet. The whole forest stood in listening silence. Of course, the Ent voices had stopped. What did that mean? Bray Galad was standing up erect and tense, looking back northwards towards Durndingle. Then with a crash came a great ringing shout. Ra! Hoom! Ra! The trees quivered and bent as if a gust had struck them. There was another pause, and then a marching music began like solemn drums, and above the rolling beats and booms there welled voices singing high and strong. Bray Galad picked up the hobbits and strode from his house. Before long, they saw the marching line approaching. The Ents were swinging along with great strides down the slope towards them. Treebeard was at their head, and some 50 followers were behind him, 2 abreast, keeping step with their feet and beating time with their hands upon their flanks. As they drew near, the flash and flicker of their eyes could be seen. Here we come with a boom, here we come at last, called Treebeard when he caught sight of Bray Galad and the hobbits. Come, join the moot, we are off to Isengard. To Isengard, the Ents cried in many voices, to Isengard. Bray Galad, his eyes shining, swung into the line beside Treebeard. The old Ent now took the hobbits back and set them on his shoulders again, and so they rode proudly at the head of the singing company with beating hearts and heads held high. Though they had expected something to happen eventually, they were amazed at the change that had come over the Ents. It seemed now as sudden as the bursting of a flood that had long been held back by a dike. The Ents made up their minds rather quickly after all, didn't they? Pippin ventured to say after some time, when for a moment the singing paused and only the beating of hands and feet was heard. Quickly, said Treebeard. Yes indeed. Quicker than I expected. Indeed, I have not seen them roused like this for many an age. We Ents do not like being roused, and we never are roused unless it is clear to us that our trees and our lives are in great danger. That has not happened in this forest since the wars of Sauron and the Men of the Sea. It is the orc work, the wanton hewing, Rarum, without even the bad excuse of feeding the fires that has so angered us, and the treachery of a neighbor who should have helped us. Down with Saruman. Will you really break the doors of Isengard? Asked Mary. Well, we could, you know. You do not know, perhaps, how strong we are. Maybe you have heard of trolls? We are stronger than trolls. We are made of the bones of the earth.
Harder than the sun.
We can split stone like the roots of trees, only quicker, far quicker if our minds are roused. If we are not hewn down or destroyed by fire or blast of sorcery, we could split Isengard into splinters and crack its walls into rubble. But Saruman will try to stop you, won't he? Yes, that is so. I have not forgotten it. Indeed, I have thought long about it. But, you see, many of the Ents are younger than I am by many lives of trees. They are all roused now, and their mind is all on one thing, breaking Isengard. But they will start thinking again before long. They will cool down a little when we take our evening drink. What a thirst we shall have! But let them march now and sing. We have a long way to go, and there is much time ahead for thought. It is something to have started. Treebeard marched on, singing with the others for a while. But after a time his voice died to a murmur and fell silent again. Pippin could see that his old brow was wrinkled and knotted. At last he looked up, and Pippin could see a sad look in his eyes. Sad but not unhappy. There was a light in them, as if the green flame had sunk deeper into the dark wells of his thought. Of course, it is likely enough, my friends, he said slowly. Likely enough that we are going to our doom, the last march of the Ents. But if we stayed at home and did nothing, doom would find us anyway, sooner or later. That thought has long been growing in our hearts, and that is why we are marching now. It was not a hasty resolve. Now, at least, the last march of the Ents may be worth a song. Aye, he sighed, we may help the other peoples before we pass away. Treebeard knows that they are probably not all gonna make it back. All of the Ents are aware that they're now taking part in a war that is usually the concern of elves and men and wizards. They're aware that they're concerning themselves in matters beyond their borders. And it was not a hasty resolve. If we stayed at home and did nothing, doom would find us anyway sooner or later. You can fence yourselves in, but you cannot forever fence it out is an ongoing theme in this text. And again we say, the last march of the Ents may be worth a song. Treebeard is aware that they are probably going to be part of the oral tradition of Middle-earth. And he's already got a name for it, the last march of the Ents. It is sad, but not unhappy. The Ents went striding on at a great pace. They had descended into a long fold of the land that fell away southward. Now they began to climb up and up, onto the high western ridge. The woods fell away, and they came to scattered groups of birch, and then to bare slopes where only a few gaunt pine trees grew. The sun sank behind the dark hill back in front. Gray dusk fell. Pippin looked behind. The number of the Ents had grown, or what was happening? Where the dim bare slopes that they had crossed should lie, he thought he saw groves of trees, but they were moving. Could it be that the trees of Fangorn were awake, and the forest was rising, marching over the hills to war? He rubbed his eyes, wondering if sleep and shadow had deceived him, but the great gray shapes moved steadily onward. There was a noise like wind in many branches. The Ents were drawing near the crest of the ridge now, and all song had ceased. Night fell, and there was silence. Nothing was to be heard save a faint quiver of the earth beneath the feet of the Ents, and a rustle, the shade of a whisper as of many drifting leaves. At last they stood upon the summit and looked down into a dark pit, the great cleft at the end of the mountains, Nan Curunir, the valley of Saruman. Night lies over Isengard, said Treebeard. And that's the end of that chapter. So much to like in here. Yes, we're on a forest walk with Tolkien, but we're also thinking about the naming of things, the significance of language. That's, again, all over this text. And how the names of things tell the story of what they are and their history. Like, it does, to me, tie into the importance of appreciating our connection to nature and the world around us. Like the passage about the hill, which Treebeard calls Ah la 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 rumba kamanda lindor burume. That's part of his name for it. Like, to a hobbit or a man, it's just a hill. To Treebeard, it's a whole story. And you'll notice that my Treebeard voice, even though it kind of sounds like Bane apparently, is not slowed down, because to me, don't be hasty doesn't mean I move more slowly because I'm a tree. Like, Treebeard can walk and talk and do things at regular pace and speed. To me, don't be hasty always meant something similar to stop and smell the roses, like take the time to appreciate and observe and spend some time in nature. That's what we're here to do, and that's what this chapter is all about, and I simply love it. The other kind of theme that I think we're getting at in this chapter is disenchantment. There's a sense of like losing our connection to nature and all that comes with it. The simple mystery of the natural world, the meaning and the magic inherent with nature if you take the time to see it. Like, this theme does have longevity, even though this book is very old. I still connect with this theme. Like, now we're losing our old growth forests. Like, they're being cut down. Deforestation is rampant across the globe. And with the loss of those forests, we're losing centuries of like natural wisdom. I feel that injury. I think we all feel that injury, even if it's subconscious and we don't want to acknowledge it. Like, in this chapter, we feel Treebeard's frustration at Ents becoming tree-ish. We feel the grief of Quickbeam and Treebeard and the other Ents for the just wanton destruction of parts of their forest. Like, the creatures that Treebeard has known from Nut and Acorn who are no longer, simply because Saruman saw fit to cut them down. The Ents that are becoming tree-ish, the Ents and trees that were cut down before their time. They cannot tell their stories. They cannot sing and share their history. Their names will not be known. And to me, the March of the Ents is a march and a demonstration against industrialization. It's a forced acknowledgement of the damage that nature has taken at the mechanical hands of industry. I'm not saying it's an allegory, that's simply what that is. Saruman has a mind of metal and wheels, and the forest rises up. In that last piece of the chapter, Pippin is noticing, like, is the forest fucking moving? And it is. The forest is moved to action. It's finally woken up and been roused and is moving to demonstrate its ire and anger and how it absolutely will not take this treatment any longer. I also feel it connecting to when Treebeard says, you live in holes, eh? That's very right and proper. Hobbits are close to nature, and Treebeard finds them familiar, pleasant, and nice because they are close to nature. That kind of symbiosis, that push and pull of familiarity, the hobbits feeling a sense of safety rather than fear. They feel comfortable and close to Treebeard and Quickbeam pretty much immediately. Like, they're holding hands with Quickbeam and like laughing and singing in the forest with him. There's value and power in that sense of community and connection and communication. And I think that is kind of the through line of this chapter in particular. It's important to stay in close contact with the natural world. And the destruction of nature is synonymous with this destruction of communal consciousness in a way. Merry and Pippin show up and remind Treebeard that there's other stuff going on, that they're part of a larger world. The Ents, I mean. And it is the appearance of Merry and Pippin and the news that they bring that kind of spurs him to action. But as he says, it wasn't a hasty resolve. Like, he's been aware of what Saruman's been up to for a while. He's been suspicious of what's been going on, and he's been feeling the injury of the deforestation of Fangorn. So it just takes the mere presence and appearance of the Hobbit PR team to get Treebeard to, like, make a move and spur the Ents to action. So I kind of like to read this as a commentary on the power of collective action. Like, we can make change by coming together and agreeing on a common cause and purpose and demonstrating our collective power. And I do think, again, this text has such longevity because that theme in particular, especially in times like these, still rings true. And I just think that's wonderful. Tolkien talks about this chapter as having mostly written itself, and Christopher Tolkien reinforces this in the history of Middle-earth. Like, he talks about how the initial draft that J.R.R. wrote down in ink, hastily, scribbling, it's almost unreadable. He was writing so fast because it was just coming right out of him. From the very first draft to what's in the published text, there was very little change. The history of Middle-earth explores many different drafts of Lord of the Rings. We're going to get into more detail, especially with Merry and Pippin coming up. But this is a chapter that kind of just came right out of Tolkien without much editing or change needed, because I, again, think that it's just his experience kind of speaking for itself. Like, he's close to nature. He spent a lot of time walking around in forests and spending time with trees. So he didn't need to invent much. It just kind of was there in him the whole time. Tolkien's flexing about how he knows about different kinds of trees. Like, it's just really lovely, really sweet. And again, one of my favorite chapters. Another thing I love about this chapter in particular is that it's super different from the film. I do think Treebeard kind of gets a raw deal in Peter Jackson's film adaptation. Treebeard just comes off as kind of a dum-dum in the movies, and he doesn't have that much agency. He's totally content to just, like, chill and vibe, and it takes Merry and Pippin showing up and telling him to, like, go look at the deforestation, as if Treebeard wouldn't already be aware of it. He just seems like kind of a ding-dong, like, kind of a doofus, kind of a dingus in the movie. And I just, I much prefer the book version. The version that's wise, the version that's kind of in on the joke, the version that is patient and gentle and down to get roused when the kind of conditions and situation are right for it. All right, one more thing. I do understand why they had to change Treebeard as a character and his storyline in the movie. I get it, okay? The concurrent storyline here is the Battle of Helm's Deep. So in the movie, we're cutting between an epic battle and then two little guys talking to a tree man. So the pacing is weird. I get why they had to, like, downsize and minimize Treebeard's character and storyline and take out all of this stuff to make the movie work. That makes complete sense to me. I'm not poo-pooing all that. I just love that Tolkien takes the time in the text to pump the brakes and take us on a forest walk. Take us through this long chapter where we learn all about Ents, all about Entwives, all about Treebeard's worldview, all about Entmoot and the different Ents that are in Fangorn Forest. We go from not knowing about Ents at all to meeting several many types of Ents and marching on Isengard over the course of one chapter. And even though it's, like, a lot of exposition, a lot of dialogue, and it's a very long chapter, it's really effective, and I think its placement in the text is helpful and important. Like, yeah, let's take a break, let's go to the forest for a little while, okay? Again, throughout this chapter, throughout the text as a whole, but especially, I think, in this chapter, you can tell that Tolkien was just a guy who loves nature. It comes through so much in this chapter in particular, and again, I do understand why we couldn't stop and smell the roses, so to speak, in the film, but I'm so glad that this chapter is in the text. It makes my heart sing. And that's all from me. Back to me. So yeah, that's another reason I wanted to spend some time with this chapter, is because It is very different from the film adaptation, and I do think, personally, in my old age, that's kind of what I gravitate towards about the actual text, is the ways in which it is different, and in this case, better than the film adaptation, because the film adaptation is like the mainstream version of what Lord of the Rings is, but the book is always going to be here, and I'm, always down to spend more time with it. So I really appreciate you spending this time with me and the book. I will be back soon. I promise this time it's soon. I'm not just saying that. Because I can't stop thinking about Merry and Pippin. I've been reading a lot of History of Middle-earth. I've been reading a lot of drafts of Lord of the Rings. And these characters are very interesting. I want to chat about how they developed into the characters they are in the text. And I want to talk about how the text version is different from the movie version. So we're going to get into that. And I can't wait. So I'll be back with you. In the meantime, be good, don't be hasty, and I'll see you again soon. Thank you.